Welcome back for the second talk of the day. When we first announced that we wanted to put extendsConf together, I think Zoltan was actually the first person to reach out to us with an idea for a talk. And debugging is a topic that I am perpetually interested in. Wherever you sit on the spectrum, from advanced Xdebug master to, if you're like me, you're more frequently putting die dump statements into your code and hitting refresh on the browser, or anywhere in between. When we heard that Zoltan has some debugging tips and tricks to share, we were immediately interested. So we do get to Q&A with Zoltan after this one, so please be popping your questions into our chat and join us in the Q&A room after. And without further ado, here is Zoltan.
Hi, my name is Zoltan Varady from Farm Studios, and today I'm going to talk to you about debugging in Craft CMS. Now, I'm not going to talk about things like Xdebug or debuggers that will integrate with your IDE. Those are great tools in their own right. I'm more going to talk about the tools that are built into Craft, like the Craft logs and the debug toolbar. Okay, so have you ever had the trouble like having an error and you're trying to investigate? And you go down to the storage logs directory to look at web.log, and you try to find the content there. You take a look under the hood, and you find like, God, that's a lot of SQL statements and server information, and just a lot of stuff that makes it really hard to parse. No, you need a more refined approach. You need something more, that you could do in a lab. Like take this Petri dish that I stole from my kid's pandemic set. You want something where you could just take your errors, you can grow them, reproduce them, test it, and do it like in a really nice to see lab environment. So that's what we are going to do right now. So once you get down into your storage logs directory, you will see a bunch of files. Now, if we're looking for web requests, they're going to be looking at the web.log, which has quite a bit of information in there. You could try paging through it with less, but again, it's really, really hard to find what you need. So what one does is one uses regular expressions, right? So you try to search for a string like error, and well, this is what you get. And sure, I mean, deprecation error, deprecation error, deprecation error. I mean, sure, I could fix those deprecation errors and then I would have less noise in my log file. Well, that's something I should do. Also, maybe I could put the blame onto Pixel and Tonic. Maybe I could ask them to rename that table to deprecation warning or something. Either way, this is too much information that I need to filter out somehow, so I use a regular expression. So if I tack that on, that little bracket, it will show me just the error itself. It doesn't give me too much of context information though. So if I add the C flag, then it will give me enough to show a stack trace. And yeah, this is beginning to be helpful, but it's not really easy to use. So let's see what we can do. We can go and configure the YE logging components, which Craft is using behind the scenes. Now, as Craft people, we rarely venture down to YE land, but maybe we should. So what we can do is we can configure our logging targets. Web.log is just one logging target that's configured in a particular way, and we can have multiple where we can set things like error levels that we want to collect. So we can say that, for example, we only want to see the error messages and not the info messages. We can also set categories. Now categories are interesting in the way that it's basically a string that you can pass while logging, but they usually correspond to the actual class and maybe even method name that's doing the logging. So you can use wildcards here and also exclude things like database queries. I'll show that to you in a minute. And you can also specify which variables you want to log. So you get a lot of these get, post, server variables, especially server variables can be like 30 lines long for each request. That's a bit too much. It can be useful if you try to replicate the request by the curl, for example, but otherwise maybe it's just easier to get rid of it. So that's also something we can do. And yeah, all of these things you can just configure in a standard way with ye in your application config, which is the config/app.php. Yours may look something like this. And what you need to do here is override the default components. So we'll put the component section here. And we need to override the log component. And that's going to return a function. And here we can do our little additions and changes. Let's see what Craft CMS does by default here. This is what's in Craft's original app.php. It uses its own helper called log config. Let's see what's going on there. So it's trying to figure out if this is a web request or a console request. Then it's setting all these file mode targets, dir mode targets. Those you can actually set in general.php config. Unfortunately, the exceptions you cannot, so that's baked in. There it's trying to figure out whether it's a console or a web.log request. And unfortunately, also the target levels are baked in as well, so you cannot change those in general.php. But in app.php, here we can change anything we want. So we'll keep this Craft's original web.log as a baseline, and we will add our own log targets. So here's one I baked earlier. This is going to collect errors, so levels is only error. The only variables we're logging is get and post, and we're writing it out to error.log. Let's see. Yeah, and we're going to set up another info log target, which will put errors, warning, and infos, and it will ignore all the DB categories, which means no SQL queries inside. Now let's check our results. So right now, yeah, we have some log files. Let's just truncate them all to 0, so we see the size difference. Yeah, everything is nicely 0 now. Let's trigger an error. This is one single simple template error. And what we'll see is, well, we have 30K in the web.log and only 2K in our error.log and info log. Yeah, this is our web.log for just one request. And then this is our error log, which is one error and its stack trace, which is really nice and easy to read. Our info log, it includes a bit more information, with, like, for example, all the plugins have their initialization information in here, which they want to post. Now, I mean, this is just for one request. Now we want to trigger a few more errors or a few more logs. We could go to different pages and have web.log collect a few more statements. Okay. So now that we have enough information, let's see where we have. Well, the web.log is now up to 3 megs and the error log is still at 2K. That should make things a lot easier to parse. Now, plugins. You might want to have a separate log file per plugin, just like you did in Craft 2. Now, there are several ways to achieve this in Craft 3, but with this knowledge that I gave you about log targets and categories, you can see that it's easy to filter those out on your own. So you have like an info message that says statistics plugin initialized. That's a super important message that we have in most of our plugins generated by plugin factory, right? The important bit is the category method at the end, which will put the whole namespace, farm statistics, and the method name in it into the category. So we can filter on that. I always forget that there's no craft log. There's like craft info, there's craft warning, craft error, but there's no craft log. So we'll keep it info right here. Yeah, and we'll use this method statement, which will include this namespace and init. Yeah. And we reload, and what we'll find is, yep, there's all this farm statistics plugin. That's our category name, so that's what we need to filter on. So we'll create a new log target, and yeah, this is going to be farm statistics in the category. And the log file is going to be farm statistics log. So if we reload a couple of times, there should be a new file called farm statistics log that only includes our log output. Yeah, that's it. We have our separate log file, and the advantage of this approach is that we can actually have separate log files even for plugins we didn't write, provided they give us the proper categories. Now, plugin you also might consider use is Ben Croker's Craft Log to File plugin, which makes this a little bit easier. You can create the plugin and then use the log to file and log to file info. With the plugin handle, we write the log message to the plugin handle.log. So no need to mess with app.php. It will just write to the correct log file based on the category that we are using. Another interesting feature is that you don't need to use just log files. You can just easily have a log to the database, or have log send you an email, or you could just write your own log handler, log target handler, and write your own web service or whatnot. The DB target is actually, it's not that hard to enable. There's a YE migration that you could try to run, and the YE command line tool is hidden in vendor/bin. It does run, but unfortunately the actual YE migration, it's going to fail. So yeah, so that unfortunately does not work. But you see, there's the migration path. It says ye/log/migrations. So we might find some hints there, and indeed in the vendor ye log migrations directory, we find the schemas for MySQL and Postgres. And if we create this log table, it just needs to be created and add the DB log target. It's just going to start working automatically. And yeah, in this log table, we'll have all of the log entries nicely put into rows that you can then later filter, search, do whatever you need with them. And this also could be useful for load balanced environments where you have multiple web servers which each have their own log files, but you could log to a central database. All right, I think it's time for a drink. Cheers. So let's take a look at the debug toolbar. For this example, I'll be showing the site of this year's Budapest Design Week. It has a list of events that can be filtered by, probably too many categories, but well, that's what you get. And yeah, you can filter by category. I'd even do multiple at a time. But as you can see, it is reacting a bit sluggish. So let's try to see if we can have some performance improvements. For this, we need to enable the debug toolbar, which you can do in the Craft admin under your profile. In preferences, just enable the debug toolbar on the front end. And yeah, you should be getting your debug toolbar on here after the reload. Yep, that's where it is. Now we can see that this did take about 1,300 database queries, which took more than 6 seconds. So that is an indication that's too many queries. It's probably an opportunity for eager loading. If you don't know, eager loading is a technique where you can, using one query, load an element and also related elements like related images or categories. So to avoid the n+1 select problem. But let's research a bit more, see what we get here. In the database tab, there's more than 1,000 entries. I can sort by duration. Sorting by duration allows us to see if there's any particularly slow or long queries. 70 milliseconds is not great, but it's not too bad either. It's more like the number of queries we have that's the problem. There's also other tabs here that you can use. There's all the events. This would include things like, like before save, after save, all of the events that you can hook into or override using V or Craft. You have a timeline of the actual query, how much time it used at this point. This is going fairly linearly. And you can see all the functions that are being called, which is mostly queries. You can put your own dumped variables or information in the dump tab. User will list information about the current user. Router will show you the current route that's being used. Logs will show you all the logs that we previously went into in depth. The interesting bits are mail, And this will actually catch all the email that's being sent through E. So if you're debugging like form thank you messages, this is a place where you could look. So let's get back to the database. So there's too many queries. Now, just to confirm that, we could also use the Elements panel plugin by Ben Croker again, which highlights eager loading opportunities on the page. Now, it's really obvious in this page where there's over 1,000 queries, but sometimes it could be harder to spot, so we can go and just enable that plugin. That's where it is, Elements panel. And then if we reload the page, we should see a suggestion that, yeah, there's like 500 opportunities for eager loading on this page. That's a lot. So if we click, yeah, the lead image is being duplicated a lot, and there's also a lot of opportunities with the categories as well. So let me switch to a branch I prepared earlier that has the eager loading fixed. And if you want to know more, I can point you to some articles. And now if we reload the page using this new branch, yeah, we'll see the database queries have dropped to 200. I mean, still a lot, but hey, more than 1,000 less than last time, and just under half a second. So we should try filtering now. We can see that the interface is a lot more responsive. And I can even use free text search to find results. So another interesting opportunity here is that this will actually capture AJAX requests so that we can use all of the above tools on AJAX requests. Now this uses Sprig. So if you see, if I select different options, I will get new AJAX requests here, and I can click on a specific one to see the information for that specific AJAX request, all the database queries, all of the events, all of the timelines for that specific AJAX request, and that's something that's usually hard to find in other ways. So this is what I mostly use Debug Toolbar for, is eager loading, performance, and AJAX requests. Lastly, we're going to talk about stack traces, error screens. We have hit an error on this page. Now, if I click on a country, it's going to trigger a classic Craft error page. Well, we can see, I misspelled string to upper. This is a simple mistake in my service. And you have a stack trace below. You can parse. There are some nice features in here. I mean, you can pray and the Stack Overflow, it will copy the actual error message and see if you get a result for that. But it's more like a gimmick. It's not something that you can really use. With some systems like Laravel has this Ignition, like advanced, really pretty error page. And this is something that Michael Rock tried to recreate for Craft. And he has a project called Canary, which is going to be the kinder, cuter, clever error handler for Craft CMS 3. Now, It is in development, so there's a lot of features still missing, but if we enable that and try to go to the same error page, you see we get something far nicer. The actual error is highlighted much better. We can go click through the stack trace, and we get a lot of extra information like the user, the environment variables, and this debug, it's going to be the most interesting, I think, but it's still under development. It should give you actual hints to what the error is, but I'm going to let Michael talk about that one. Hopefully he'll be here to answer some questions. So, thanks for watching. I hope this helped to refine your tools in your debugging lab. And if you want to learn more, there's a couple of great articles, of course, by the incomparable Andy Welch. And he has a couple of blog articles on logging and eager loading, performance improvements, and also handling errors gracefully and defensive coding. So make sure to check out those. And I will see you soon.